Hello there. Today um, we're going to finish out the lesson on comparing decimals, and it was kind of a three-part lesson. And today we're doing the last part of the lesson, and so we're on 7.3, and we only have 6 problems. And so what we're going to do is we're going to just fold our paper into 4 sections. Um, and that way we'll have enough space for all of the problems that we're going to do. So I'm going to share my screen right now so that you can see my paper. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and fold into 4. And then I'm going to write my name in the corner. And we're going to call this lesson 7.3. And we're going to do pages 32 through 34. We're actually going to do 33 through 34. Okay. So on page 33, we're going to do a little bit of writing in this little corner. They're going to give us a little situation, a scenario, and we're going to do a little bit of math writing on this little section right here. So in our book, it says both Andy and Rita think that 23 hundredths is greater than 3/10. So Rita is saying 23 is greater than 3. So 23 hundredths is greater than 3/10. And Andy is saying 23 tenths is greater than 3/10. So 23 hundredths is greater than 3/10. Do you agree? Why or why not? So let's stop for a second and let's actually make a little chart. And we're going to look at these two numbers. And the way that we compare numbers is always by stacking them and lining up decimals. So if I made a little chart right here up at the top, and my chart had ones, tenths, hundredths, it's just basically the same chart that you can even make it a little fancier. And we're going to put 2 numbers here. So we're going to first put 23 hundredths. So that looks like this, 0, 2, 3, right? And then we're going to stack it up and we're going to put 3/10, 0, 3. So always when we're comparing numbers, we are always starting out on this side and we're looking at place value, right? So both of these have zeros in the ones place. So if the numbers are the same, then we move to the next place value. I have a 2 here and a 3 here. I could also, if I wanted to help myself, I could put a little imaginary, I'll draw it a little darker, an imaginary 0 in here. So 3/10 is actually equal to 30 hundredths, right? So we're going to say that both Andy and Rita are wrong. Are incorrect. So I'm going to say when we stack the numbers by lining up the decimals, we can see that 3/10 is greater. Right? And we also know, that 3/10 equals 30 hundredths, right? Because we just put that little imaginary zero there. And 30 hundredths is greater than 23 hundredths. I always hate when you're writing and you have a period and working with decimals, because that's really confusing. This is the decimal, this is my period. All right, so one of the ways, the most common sense way to compare any number is to stack it. And the easiest way to compare decimals is to line up the decimal points when you're stacking them, right? And if you make a little chart like this, it makes it really easy to do that. So we always want to line up the decimals, and that way we can easily compare them. We can start at the left with the largest, the highest place value, just like we do with whole numbers, right? When we're comparing numbers, we always stack them, and we usually stack them by comma, don't we? We use the comma as the way to stack them. This time when we're working with decimals, we're going to use the decimal to stack them. So yeah, if I put an imaginary zero on the end here, 3/10 is equivalent to 30 hundredths, right? Just like if you had two squares and one of them was tenths, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then one of them was hundredths. Pretend this is hundredths. I'm doing a really sloppy job. But if we were to compare these, let's say that I did 30 hundredths is going to look like this, right? Is going to be the same as, this is 3/10, and then this is 30 hundredths. And it's going to be exactly the same. So it's equivalent. Putting this little zero on here makes it equivalent to 3/10. Right? So we know that both of those students are wrong. Okay, let's look at the next page. This time we have on number 1, we have a times table chart, or not a times table chart, sorry, a place value chart. It's Friday and I can tell that my brain is short-circuiting. So if I go ahead and I draw the same chart that I'm seeing in the math book, I have this dark line right here, and then this says ones, this says tenths, this says hundredths, right? And then I have two numbers that I'm comparing. This is where the decimal's gonna go, right? So I'm lining up the decimals, and I have this, and then I have a little circle, and then I have this, right? And we're going to use a greater than, less than sign, or equal sign. These do not look equal to me. This one we put up here, and we have 0, 7, 0. And when we say this number, it's going to be 70 hundredths, right? And then when I put this number down here, this number is definitely going to be greater, because we always start at the left to compare place value, right? And if we are looking at 2 and 0, if we're looking at 0 and 2, 2 is always going to be greater. So the sign's going to go this way with the the alligator chomping the bigger number, right? So 2 and 77 hundredths is greater than 70 hundredths. Mostly because we have the whole number 2 there, right? Okay, let's look at number 2. We have another chart in our math book that shows the exact same thing. So I'm just drawing it again. It's always a good idea to, when there's a chart in your book, to show your work. This is tenths. This is hundredths. All right, so then we have 2 and 76 hundredths. And we're comparing it with 2 and 77 hundredths. So if we write the first number, 2 and 76 hundredths, and then we have 2 and 77 hundredths. So again, we're always starting at the largest. We start on the left when we're comparing, right? And we say 2 versus 2, they're the same. So as soon as they're the same, it bumps you to the next place value. 7 and 7, they're the same. Boom, it bumps us to the hundredths. And we look at this and we say, 6 hundredths versus 7 hundredths. 7 hundredths is greater. So we're going to put our sign facing this way again. All right. And it's only greater by 1/100th, right? By a teensy tiny amount, but still it is greater. All right. I'm going to do number 3 next. Number 3 gives us 3 numbers. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stack them up. I'm using this same little chart. I'm just making it faster. My decimal's right here. So I'm going to stack up the 3 numbers. I'm going to go like this, 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to figure out which one is, it says we're doing it least to greatest. So I'm going to figure out which one is the smallest, and then I'm going to list them in order. Okay. So I start out with, I'm going to put my decimals in right here. I always want to line up the decimals. I start out with, I'm going to write ones again because sometimes that looks like a 0. So I start out with 49 hundredths. Then I have 4 tenths. And then I have 53. Whoops. Sorry, I need to make the lights come back on. Come on, lights. Woo! There we go. Then I have 53 hundredths. Now, whenever you have a missing number right here, you can just draw in a 0 if that helps you. And I'm saying it because it helps me. So when I'm comparing numbers and I have missing information, I'm just going to put a 0 in there so that my brain can process the missing the blank part, right? Our brains like to see things complete. So if I want to do, I'm doing least to greatest. So I start out and all 3 have 0s, right? So that's going to bump me over here. 4, 4, and 5. 5 is going to be the greatest. So I have, this one is greatest. And we're doing least to greatest. So this comes in first in our contest. Now, if I have 4 and 4, I'm comparing these two. That's going to bump me over here. And I have 0 and 9. This one's going to come in second. So we're going to put it in the middle. And then the smallest one is going to be and I'm going to leave the 0 off this time. Okay. You can put it on if you want, but I'm leaving it off because in the problem it didn't have the 0 in it. So it wasn't 40 hundredths, it was 4/10. So this would be like 40 hundredths. This is 49 hundredths. This is 53 hundredths. And that makes sense, right? I'm going smaller to larger. Okay, let's do number 4. I like doing these. Let's do number 4. We're going to make the same chart, and we're also doing least to greatest. We have ones. Then we're going to also have 3. And then we have tenths and hundredths, right? So our first number is 2 and 8/10. And then we're comparing 2 and 8/100. And then we're comparing 2 and 88/100. So again, our brain, we've been spending our whole school lives training our brains to go from left to right, right? Since preschool, you've been going from left to right with your eyes, and then you learned how to read, and that reinforced going left to right. Also, we like to see things completed, right? We like to see completion. Our brains work by a principle called Gestalt, where we like to see completion. So when, like, if you look at a puzzle and one piece is missing, it drives you crazy. Where's that missing piece? Did it fall on the floor? So you can't even look at the whole puzzle because all you're looking at is the missing piece, and it's driving you crazy. So your brain wants to see this spot filled. It just does. So go ahead and fill it with a 0. You can make it a dark 0, or you can make it a kind of fun imaginary 0. That's up to you. Okay. Now we're also doing least to greatest. So we start here always at the left, right? This is the spot we start at. 2, 2, 2, they're all the same. 8, 8. This is smaller, right? Because it has a 0 here. So we're going to start out with this one, right? And I'm going to cross that out. It comes in first. It's the least. Then we have our next one, 8 and 8. That's going to bump us over here. And then this is going to be our next sized one. This comes in second. Okay, so putting that imaginary 0 in there helps us to complete the picture, right? So that our brain can go, oh, yes, 8 is greater than 0. Also, the other key is remembering that these have to all be stacked up, right? That's really, really, really important. In fact, that's key to comparing decimals. Okay, so we know that 8/100 is definitely smaller than 80/100, and that's definitely smaller than 88/100. Okay, let's look at number 5. Now we're doing greatest to least. So don't forget that. So this is ones. Here's our decimal, and we're going to do, we have 3 numbers we're comparing. Here's tenths, and here's hundredths. So our first number is 51 hundredths. So we have 0, 5, 1. Then we have 57 hundredths. So we have 0.57. Then we have 1 and 2 hundredths. So we're going greatest G to L, greatest to least. Don't forget, otherwise you get the answer wrong. So if I'm looking here, I always start at the left. And if I'm looking here, I know that this one's the greatest because it's got a 1 there. So I'm going to write 1 0.02 or 1 200ths is greater than, so this came in first. Now I'm comparing 5 and 5, they're the same, so I go next door and I'm comparing 7 and 1, and I know that 7 is greater than 1. So I know that this dude comes in second, and then this dude comes in last. All right. So definitely 1 200ths, because of the 1 here, is the greatest. And then 57 hundredths is greater than 51 hundredths. Okay. So don't be afraid. This takes 1 second to stack them. And sometimes I see kids get lazy and they just start writing numbers down without stacking the decimals. And there's a great chance that you're going to mess up if you don't stack the decimals. In fact, you don't even have to make this chart. If you're super lazy, watch, I'll show you how to do it. Just go like this, 1, 2, 3. If you're too lazy to make the lines, just make the decimals. Let's do number 6. Here we go. We have 4 and 32 hundredths. Then we have 2 and 43 hundredths. And then we have 3 and 24 hundredths. This is comparing for lazy people. And again, we're doing greatest to least. So I don't want to forget that and put the answers in the wrong order. So I haven't even labeled it or put lines. I'm starting right here, 4, 2, 3. Which one's the greatest? 4. Next, definitely 3. And then the last is 2 and 43 hundredths. Okay, so even if you just do the lazy version and you just stack the decimals, this is what constitutes showing your work, right? That you're actually not just eyeballing it, that you're writing them down and stacking them so that I can see that you're comparing them, right? Even if you're too lazy to label the place value columns, at least if you put the decimals in, I know that you know what you're doing and that you're not just guessing, okay? Or eyeballing it. All right. I hope this helped you, and thank you so much for watching these videos and for spending time with me. I feel like I'm really proud of you guys because we are at the exact same point in math that we would have been any year in a non-pandemic year. We're doing math at a nice, good, fast clip, and you guys are watching these lessons, and so we don't really miss a beat. We're able to do lessons on Zoom, and then you guys are able to catch up on your own and watch the lesson. And so I really appreciate that you're watching them and you're doing the work, because you're going to be right on track for 5th grade math. You're going to walk into 5th grade and you're going to feel really good and really comfortable, especially if you know your times tables. You're going to be prepared for 5th grade math, which 5th grade math's hard. I taught 5th grade for years and years and years. And we used to always joke around and say that if you can do 5th grade math, you can do anything. Because most adults, 5th grade math is the math that almost everyone uses to get by in life, right? So 5th grade is where math starts to get fairly difficult. Most adults use 5th grade math in their daily lives. So you will be fine if you're watching these lessons and you're following along and you're keeping up with math. You're going to do just fine. If you're not watching the lessons and you're not following along and you're not doing the work, you're going to be in a spiraling black hole of death when you get to 5th grade math. So I would advise you to be watching these lessons and make sure that you're watching them. I can tell who's watching them and who isn't just by your STAR test scores. and also by the work that you turn into me. So hopefully these are helpful to you. And I want to thank you for working so hard. And I know this is not easy. If someone would have told me in fourth grade that I had to do math all by myself, I would say that's not happening. And I appreciate you guys that you are making it happen and you're doing a really good job. And I wanted to thank you for that. All right. Thanks for joining me.